Alright guys, so we're going to go over 10.1 to 3 quiz review. So first thing we're going to talk about is number 1, name the circle. This is reviewing over 10.1 concepts. So name the circle. You always look at the center of the circle, which here would be A. And you could do two things. You can literally say circle A, or you can draw a circle and then a capital A. So circle A or circle A. Name two radii. So these are going to be segments. So remember, they start and they end. So a radius starts at the edge of the circle and then goes to the center. So one of them we would say AB. This also can be read as BA, same thing. With that little line above it, if you notice. And then the other one would be AD or DA. Doesn't matter to me. So those are the only two that actually touch the circle. So those are the only two radii. Chords are also segments. They're segments that touch the edge of the circle twice. So there are two exactly. So there's this one. So you would say C, also known as CH. And then the other is the diameter. So you would say DB or BD, same thing. So the diameter is a type of chord. Name a secant. So a secant is a line that touches the circle twice. So remember that tangents touch once, secants touch twice. So we're looking for a line that touches the circle twice, which would be this one. It goes through the circle twice. This is one of the options. We would say HC with arrows above, HC. You could also, same line, you could also include the letter G. So this is the same thing as GH, it's the same thing as GC. They're all the same line. Okay, so remember that G, it doesn't have a dot here necessarily, but because the two lines intersect here, your book isn't going to put a dot here because it's a hot mess. So that is representing that line. You could technically also name this one. This is a ray. But by definition, it does touch the circle twice and goes through the circle. But it's not my favorite answer. Because it's a ray, you would probably name it wrong. A ray, you have an arrow pointing to the right, if you remember. And then you have to have your starting point as the first letter. So B is the starting point. And then the second letter, you have a couple options here. The second letter could be A. So starting at B, going towards A. You could say BD, because here, I wish it would zoom in on your screen, but D again, they're not going to put a dot here because there are two things crossing, but that's D, so you could say BD, and you could also say BE, because again, E represents where these two lines intersect. So, those are a couple options. The last one is a tangent. There's only one option for this. A tangent is also a line, so it does not have a starting point nor an ending point, and then it touches the circle once. So that would be this line. However, naming it has got a couple of options. You have to have the line with arrows above, and then you pick any two letters on this line. So G is on the line right there. F is obviously on the line, and then I believe that's E. E is also on the line. So you could say GF, you could say GE, you could say FE, you could say EF, EG, really any combination of any two of those letters. So E, F, and G. D is not included. Number 6 and 7, tell whether AB is tangent to circle C. Explain your reasoning. So in order for a line to be tangent, I'm going to write off to the side, the radius and the tangent line must be perpendicular. So that means intersect and form 90. So in number 6, AB is the tangent line in question. We're asking, is this tangent? And then 5 is the radius. So we want to see if they come together and form a right angle. You can probably tell by the way they look that they don't, but we're just going to verify with some numbers. So if there was a right angle here, this would form a right triangle. So to figure out if it is a right triangle, we are going to use the Pythagorean theorem. So let's call 5A, and we can call B 11. And then the hypotenuse has to be C. So the hypotenuse is always across from the right angle, so it'd be this one. 5 squared is 25, 11 squared is 121, 13 squared is 169. Add them together. Working on it. Add them together, and we get 146 does not equal 169, so this is not tangent. On your quiz, you do need to know why it is not tangent. It's not tangent because the radius and the tangent line are not perpendicular. So make sure you know why it is the way it is. This next one actually I picked because there was a similar question on the homework for this section, and a lot of students missed it. At least the first time they missed it, possibly the second time also. So again, we're trying to decide if AB, we're questioning, is this tangent to the circle? So normally it's the tangent line and the radius, but if you look, our triangle doesn't give us the radius. Well, it does, but look at the difference between these two. I'll erase so it's easier to see. In number 6, the triangle only went to the center, it didn't go all the way through. This one, however, does. So we actually don't need the radius in this one, we need the diameter. So in this case, we're seeing if the diameter and the tangent line are perpendicular. So this is the diameter. So we need to see if they form a right angle. So the issue that students ran into was they actually only gave you the radius. They did not give you the diameter. They only gave you CD, which is 20, which means CA, since it's a radius, is the same all the way around from the center to the edge. That means CA is also 20, which means the diameter is really 40. So we're going to use this in the Pythagorean theorem to see if they form that right angle together. So again, we need to make sure we label the hypotenuse correct. The right angle points to the hypotenuse. So I'm going to call 48A, and I'm going to call 40B. So 48 squared is 2304. 40 squared is 1600, and 60 squared is 3600. So we are going to see if the other two add up to 3600. We actually can already tell it, I can already tell it doesn't, because I'm going to end with a 4, and I don't want it to end with a 4, but we'll add nonetheless. So we have 3,904. Does not equal 3,600. So this is not tangent. So if you want me to do another problem like this, you can shoot me an email and I can find another one to do, so that you can make sure you get it correct on the quiz or test or both. Alright, so points B, so again, it doesn't have a dot there because two things are intersecting, it's just understood. So points B and points D are points of tangency. Find the values of x. So basically, when 2 points of tangency come together at an outside point, we know they're going to be equidistant to that point. So that means 3x plus 4, 3x minus 4 will equal 2x plus 1. So we'll move our smaller x like normal by subtracting. And then to get x by itself, we're going to add 4. Again, you can always check by plugging it in and making sure it's correct. So this one would be 3 times, 3 times 5, which is 15, minus 4, which is equal to 11. This one would be 2 times 5, which is 10, plus 1 also equals 11. So it's a good way to check yourself is by plugging them back in. So that's the 10.1 review. The 10.2 review, we're going to start. Identify the given arc as a major, minor, or semicircle. So remember, a major arc is greater than 180. A minor arc is less than 180. And then a semicircle is equal to 180. So, and this is find the measure of the arc. So the first one is NM. So remember, whenever it's 2 letters, this is automatically a minor arc. So if we get a number bigger than 180, we did not do it correctly. So we need to find NM. The arc is congruent to the angle. So if we find this missing angle, we would find the measure of our arc. So what we can notice is of the whole circle, all of the angles are filled in except for the one that's in question. We know that an entire circle is 360 degrees. So if we add these up and subtract from 360, we would find our missing angle. So let's go ahead and do that. So 60 and 120 and 60 and 65. So I know these two make 180 and these two make 125. So that makes 305. So we're going to subtract, and that would make 55. So that means this missing piece is 55 degrees, which means the arc is also 55 degrees. And I'm going to leave it in my picture so I can use it later if I need to. This next one, JLM. J, starting at J. I want to go towards L and then end up at M. So we're going to go this way around because we don't want to do JML. We want JLM. That's our goal. So we can just add 120 plus 60 plus 65. So 120, 60, and 65. I know it's an ugly bracket. I'm out of practice, y'all. Whoop. I know 60 and 65 make 125, so if I add them together, that makes 245. So JLM is 245, and that is a major arc. So I'm going to put it on the top, major arc. Alright, then we have NLK. So starting at N, want to go in the direction of L, and then end up at K. If we add them together, we would get 180 degrees, which is a semicircle. And then the last would be LMN, LMN. So we're going to add 65 and 55. If I'm not mistaken, that's 120. 10, yep, 120. Which is a minor. It's less than 180, so minor arc. So you'll have a section like this on your quiz. So make sure you know how to do both pieces, the arc type and the measure, because it is going to ask both. This next one is a survey. A recent survey asked high school girls to name the sport they like to watch the most. The results are shown in the circle graph. Find each indicated measure. This is obviously an inaccurate graph because who's going to say skating and where is volleyball, huh? I say it's very discriminatory against a very wonderful sport. Anyways, we're going to find the measure of each. So we're going to start with FG. So FG. It is a minor arc, so you want to make sure you go the shortest route between F and G. This is baseball. So 32 degrees. That's it. The next one we want to find is EGB. So starting at E, you want to go in the direction of G, which would be up, and then end at the letter B. So we were going to add 40 degrees, 32 degrees, 28 degrees, and 108 degrees, which is 208 degrees. Then we have DB, so starting at D, going towards the letter B, the shortest distance possible, so we're going to go to the right. 51 and 54, which makes 105 degrees. And then last, ACE, so starting at A, we want to go towards C and end at E. So C is this direction, and then end at E. So we're going to add skating, basketball, gymnastics, and football. And this will equal 260 degrees. Ta-da! As my daughter would say. So we'll continue. It says, tell whether the given arcs are congruent, explain why or why not. I think your quiz, actually, since it's online, it is going to be colored. So it would say E, F, and G, H. So in order for them to be congruent, they have to have the same radius and the same measure. Same radius, same measure. So the first thing we want to check is the radius. The radius is from the center to the edge. So on the left it's marked 4, on the right it's not marked, but what I do see is this tick mark, which means that they are congruent. So the radius is congruent, check, and then we just need to make sure that they are the same measure. Because the arc will be the same measure as the central angle, we know they're both 75 degrees, so then that means they are congruent. So we would say EF is congruent to arc GH. It does say explain why or why not. This would be because they have, if we want to be particular, congruent arcs. Oops, sorry. Yeah, well, we could say congruent arcs first, and congruent radii. We don't need a comma. Congruent arcs and radii. So that would be the final answer. This next one says arc STV. So STV. And arc UVT. UVT. So obviously it's the same circle. So whenever it's the same circle, that means they have to have the same radius. Because it's the same circle. And the radius is the same all the way around. So then the question at hand is, do they have the same measure? Same measure. So what we need to do first is figure out these missing pieces. So the first thing that I know, you could probably already tell they're not going to be. You can already tell they're not going to be. Here's why. This is 90, right? 90. If you notice, you have the diameter. So that means the arc all the way through is 180 degrees. You already have 90 and 30. 90 plus 30 is 120. So that means this missing piece is 60. So if you really added them together, SV would be 30 plus 90, which is 120 degrees, whereas the other one would be 60 and 90, which makes 150. So they are not congruent. Not congruent. So we're going to answer. We could just say not congruent. I don't think that it'll have you list it not congruent. If it does on the quiz, this is the symbol for not congruent. All right, so they're not congruent. Reason why they are not. So arcs aren't the same measure, or the arcs. What am I doing? Arcs aren't congruent. So they're not congruent because the arcs aren't congruent, and that would be a reason. Now on to the last section for 10.2. It says each wheel is divided into congruent arcs. Find the measure of each arc. So we've got a little ship wheel, I guess. So here's a circle. I could do better. Here's a circle. And then it is divided by the spokes, maybe you would call them, of the wheel. So let's see how many evenly divided arcs it's split into. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we know that all of the arcs added together is 360 degrees. I know I need to divide them into 8 congruent sections, so I'm going to divide by 8, which would be 45 degrees. So that means each piece is 45, 45, 45, 45, 45, 45, 45, 45. This next one will take counting, I suppose. I'm sure you don't look forward to it, to be honest. I do not look forward to it. I don't think it would have this, this difficult looking, but we're going to do the same thing. We know that the arcs are divided, or add up to 360. Let's see how many arcs they're evenly distributed to. I'm just going to pause and count. So I'll start at 1, 2, 3, 4, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So there are 25 total. We will divide by 25, which makes 14.4 degrees. That's way too many. Okay, so then the last thing we're going to do is 10.3. 10.3. So this section will be similar to one that you had on your notes. We're using the diagram, and these are two separate problems. So nothing that we find in one boils over into two. It's all separate. So that being said, if the measure of PQ is 130 degrees, find the measure of RQ. RQ, I'm going to call it X. So, in this section you learned if you had congruent chords, they cut arcs into two congruent arcs. So congruent, congruent. So if we call RQ X, we could also call RP X. And then I know that there are 360 degrees in a circle. So I know that if I add X and 130, so X and 130, they equal 360 degrees. Combine your X's. Subtract 130. Divide by 2. So we would get 115. So RQ would be 115. Oop. I'll clean it up a little. So RQ would be 115, which means RP would be 115. And if you added them all together, you would get 360 degrees. Alright, this next one, again, none of that information applies to the second part. It says if the measure of PR is 100, so arc PR is 100, find the measure of arc PQ. So again, I know because the chords are congruent, their arcs are congruent, so RQ is 100. In this case, you can do the same thing. You can add 100 plus 100 plus x, and it equals 360. Or you can subtract 100 and 100. 100 plus 100 is 200. Subtract from 360, it is 160 degrees. Because again, if I added 100 plus 100 plus 160, that would make 360 total degrees. Number 3 says find the value of x. So we have a chord and the diameter. They are perpendicular, so they intersect and form 90. So because of this, the chord is cut into two perfect halves. So if this half is 11, that means the other half is 11. Same thing on number 2, except we're talking about the arcs. So because the chord and the diameter are perpendicular to each other, the arcs are cut into two perfect halves. So x is 65. And then number 5, it is the same idea as number 3. The chords are cut into two congruent halves, which means that they equal each other. So move the smaller x. Alright, we want to get 2x by itself, so we need to add the 3. So 2x equals 8, so then x equals 4. Before you exit out, I am going to tell you about Kahoot. I'll put it down here. I have a Kahoot made. You can either go to the link in the assignment section or on your calendar. I put there. Or you can use the code, which is 076. Man, my eyesight's bad. 5. Whoop. Where'd you go? 5. 5. 3. 2. Again, if you don't want the code, you can use the link, and I'll make sure I have that in the calendar. So please email me if you have any other questions that you want me to go over more in depth, and then good luck on your first quiz.